All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this presentation. As many of you already know, the title is The Modality of Truth, and Iboga can set you free. So before getting too far into this, I'm going to just kind of introduce myself to start. My name is Derek Shane. I'm a third-year student here at Naropa University for the Mindfulness-Based Transpersonal Counseling master's degree. And I guess the first thing to dive into is, a lot of you know that I used to be, an engineer. And how did I get to Naropa? Well, I personally had some of my own series of transpersonal experiences through psychedelics that kind of showed me a different path and kind of showed me how working with other people, helping other people is kind of, what would be best for me. So I ended up coming to Naropa, and my goal when I first started was to somehow end up as a psychedelic therapist. Didn't really know how or what direction I was going in, but that was just kind of my goal. And where I'm at this point in my life is just last summer, I went to a country in Africa called Gabon, and kind of had my own experience with Iboga. Before coming into this third year, before going away that summer, I was feeling a lot of anxiety about, what sort of modality should I be, comfortable with and using for the future with clients to give myself confidence to be a good therapist, But after going to Africa last summer, I really learned a lot, and it showed me a lot. And it's kind of around just the simplicity of life. And in addition to that, it's kind of what this presentation falls into, is about truth. Became very clear for me. So yeah, I decided to go ahead and present on that. But before we get into the goods, I'm going to just touch briefly into a little bit of history, just to give everyone a general idea, because it's not a very popular topic for people to understand. But Iboga was originally discovered by the West as early as 1901. And it was done with experimentations with ibogaine, and I'll get into what ibogaine is in just a minute. But in 1966, this ibogaine came to the United States, and a gentleman by the name of Howard Lotsoff ended up discovering through his own personal addiction how beneficial it can be for addiction. But unfortunately, it became illegal in 1968, grouped together with a lot of other psychotropic components, without any real knowledge about the benefits or the medicinal sense of what this medicine can be. And what's currently going on, if some of you may know MAPS, it's multidisciplinariation of psychedelic studies. And they have been researching a broad spectrum of different psychedelic topics for the last 15 years, working with the FDA to be approved and starting these research experiments. And I guess currently too, around the world, there's different sort of retreats for using this medicine. Canada, Mexico, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and of course Africa are some of the places that I'm familiar with. So what is Iboga? Well, the easy way to describe it would be, it's basically a small tree shrub plant located in the jungles of Africa, pretty much on the equator in the western part of the continent. And this countries of Congo, Cameroon, and Gabon are the major countries that it's found in. But one thing to note too is that it's the actual root of the plant itself that contains all of the elements of psychedelics in it, just the roots. And it's very different from any other psychedelics. If you have any sort of knowledge or experience of other psychedelics, it's very much a projection of your mind. You can see color, shapes, maybe pulsations of things, but this psychedelic is more of an introspection of yourself, where you get to communicate with yourself. And I'll get into that here in a little bit as well. But Bwiti culture, I guess, is the people that I discovered this medicine through, and it's word is that's been used for approximately 6,000 years, which is quite a long time ago. So getting just a little tidbit on this culture. So on the picture on the left there, that is a pygmy culture from the jungles in Africa. Many of you probably know pygmies, just short stature indigenous culture of people. You can see how short they are there. But they were the ones who originally discovered the plant. And, sometime within the last 6,000 years, they've shared the information that they found through the medicine with some of the regular culture, Bwiti culture, I guess, of Africa. And so Bwiti itself, what it means is the philosophy of life. It's like learning about life. It's not really like a religion at all, or a cult for that matter. Like I said, it's more about just understanding life. And the actual word itself comes from an ancient dialect that means to arrive, to reach, to end up at, or to emerge from one spot to another. So pretty interesting. And the pictures there, of course, in the middle would be what they look like for ceremonial practices. Pretty intense look, but on the right is just kind of more about their casual wear. So moving on, what is ibogaine? I mentioned that before. Ibogaine is basically just one of the several active alkaloids found in the Iboga plant. And it had been extracted and been practiced for a while, like I said, back in 1901. But, it's been only thing that's really been researched on. It's better known. And it's kind of qualified as the main purpose of it is for addiction work. And it's known to be an addiction interrupter, just pretty much canceling an addiction in just pretty much one session. And it's a lot easier to just using one chemical in a clinical setting. You have a lot easier control over the size of dosages and stuff like that. So I guess in contrast to for Iboga, like I said, Iboga contains the ibogaine inside of it. But the major difference is that Iboga can actually show therapeutic effects. And I will get into that in a little bit as well. But first, physical detoxification is something that happens with both of them. So first on the left, I was doing some research and randomly came across WebMD, and I was really surprised to see that they had a page dedicated to Iboga. It showed kind of the overview of all the usages for it, which was very interesting. Blood pressure, so this is positive things for it. So it works with blood pressure, nerve disorders, energy, HIV and AIDS, chemical addiction, fatigue, drowsiness, sex drive. And these last three, antiviral, influenza, and immune system boost, it seems kind of ironic with this pandemic that we're going through right now about how this could be potentially a beneficial medicine for a lot of rough times that people are going through. But furthermore, I guess ibogaine, like I said before, it's known as the addiction interrupter, and what it does, simple way to put it, is it resets your brain. There's a lot of neural pathways that become formed through behaviors and addiction behaviors caused by addiction. It'll form those pathways in your brain, and so the Iboga literally will go in and just snip it and kind of just reset all of the structure back to sort of the pure form of before any addiction was starting with you. But Iboga itself is more about sort of like a full body detoxification, not just in the brain. And so the Peter Levine source that I had talked a lot about animals and traumatic events that can happen to them. Trauma causes, them to have these experiences, and what they do is they tend to shake it out. Well, humans aren't that good at knowing the benefit of that. So, suppressed emotions can be worked on from the medicine. And in addition to that, the Brennan book that's also labeled down there, it's a book about healing energy fields of humans, which I thought was really interesting. And it's known that emotional trauma can actually impact your aura, like that picture shows. Your aura is a cloud of energy around you, and as it gets denser and closer to your body, it can actually start to cause physical ailments in your body. And the cool thing that Iboga can do is it actually will go through and scan your body for any sort of ailments that it sees. And it's the way that was shared in the Bwiti culture with me about how this actually works, deals with the sense that Iboga, the plant, the roots are in the earth. So it has a natural sense as what the earth's frequency waves are. And us being humans, we're from earth too. So the medicine, when it gets through you, it will go through all of your cells and just kind of sense if there's any sort of frequency that's in the negative field of frequency. So it's really interesting. But anyhow, physical detoxification is kind of the first step that happens in this ceremonial transition. And coming to a quote here before I get into the truth modality part, from Caroline Miss. Exposure to truth changes your life, period. Whether that truth is a revelation about personal honesty and integrity, or a divine revelation that recognizes your place in the universe. And Caroline Miss, she's an internationally renowned speaker in the field of human consciousness, spirituality, health, energy medicine, etc. So that just really resonated with me when I was doing some research. And moving on to the actual kind of the truth modality, I find this to be a very key part of life in general. So there's these four different ways to kind of see it away from the medicine, but just kind of make sense of, you know, what happens with truth. And I guess I should mention here too, that the opposite of truth is not necessarily you're lying to yourself directly, but it's more about the falsehood in your life. So, you know, lying to yourself or being lied to, or just things that you believe can all, you know, work against the truth. So moving on, cognitive dissonance. So this is a pretty telltale sign you're lying to yourself. I guess one of the signs is that you find yourself to be confused. And that's kind of where the cognitive dissonance notion kind of comes to me from, lying to yourself. And the way you can kind of make sense of this happening is a lot of people I'm sure know about lie detector tests. Well, besides the intention for their use, the reason they were made is because there's physiological responses that come from lying. The brain sends signals to your heart that it causes, you know, breathing rates to increase, your heartbeat increasing, your blood pressure increasing, you're sweating more, stuff like that. So lying, in a sense, is causing your body to have that reaction as well. And another notion too is always forced to remember lies. So, you know, if you're being truthful and something gets committed to memory automatically, because our bodies and our minds tend to remember most everything that happens, the truth is there. But if you tell a lie at the same time, it still records the truth of the situation, but then it also has a recording of the lie. And that's kind of where that dissonance really comes into play too, when you have to remember both just to sort of protect yourself. It's like a constant memory that you always have to fight with. So moving on, Gestalt introjection. So here at Naropa, this is a core class that we all took for a year. It was called Gestalt Therapy by Fritz Perls. And basically, the short way to describe how this works is there's a lot of, it's like memories being processed. They have the client bring their memories out of their brain and kind of break them up into parts, whether it's parts of yourselves or parts of your communication with other people. And the way this goes is to just re-experience and kind of get a little more depth of knowledge as to why situations happen the way they do, so that when the memory is done in the session, it kind of is altered a little bit, and it's a process that keeps happening. But there's this one part of it called the introjects or introjections, but it's not like lies are happening to you, but this is more about false beliefs. And it tends to deflect people from being pure and being happy. And examples of that would be, you know, like your family, your friends, your schools, your community, your environment, your culture, lots of things can just have an influence onto what you absorb to be a belief just by you seeing it and experiencing it rather than actually digging into the truth. So the goal for this is kind of to release these false beliefs. And I guess a good way to give an example, or when I was reading this book, the way Fritz was given in it was basically an introject is like a big piece of food that just gets shoved down your throat and into your stomach. It's really hard to break down and digest and be used for your energy. But if you were able to take food and chew it up, it's kind of like processing it, understanding it, getting to know the truth about it. And then when you swallow it and use it, it's actually effective for you to use that as energy and digest in your system. So this next part is pretty interesting as well, seeing versus hearing. So there's two forms of energy, light and sound, and there's two human senses that pick that up. It's eyes and it's ears. One thing to note with this too is that both of them are really, they're tied to emotions, but slightly different way. So getting into seeing, seeing basically creates judgments and assumptions just by you seeing something, and it's really for a safety purpose. So you can think of like humans from the beginning of time with human existence. When they're out hunting, they're looking around, and just to like protect themselves, if they see like a saber-toothed tiger or something like that, they know to run and hide and be safe. So that's kind of what the eyes are picking up. And like I said, the emotions that are involved here, the one thing with seeing something is that it's not something that's happening with you right now. You are just witnessing it. So you can easily avoid that whatever situation is going on by these emotions that come up based on what you're seeing. And this often results in suppressing the emotions because you did want to avoid it, so you just got out of there. But when you tend to avoid, these or suppress these emotions through avoiding them, that can turn into negative results. And you're not really sure about what actually happened, the truth of what actually happened, because all you did was make an assumption. A great example of this would be texting. So if you get a text from one of your friends and they're trying to be funny or sarcastic, and you read it and you're just like, this guy's being a jerk, like what the heck? Like, you can just be mad and not respond to him, and that's not even the intention, but that's what your eyes told you, rather than you actually knowing what happened. And so moving on to the hearing part, hearing, in the Peter Levine book, again, there was an interesting part talking about hearing, and he had mentioned about how our eardrums have little fibers on it, basically small little hairs. And that's when sound goes into our ears, that's how it connects to our brain. But he also mentioned about how our bodies have hair on it too. And so the hairs pick up that sense a little different way, but it kind of sends it to our central nervous system. And that's kind of tied to our emotions, if you know that. Good examples of this, I guess, would be the relationship of a mother and a baby. A normal, average person, I guess, just walking by and hearing a baby crying would just be like, oh, the baby's crying, they need you. But a mother, because of the connection with the baby, of course, can hear slight tone differential in babies to be like, oh, they need food, or they need their diaper changed or whatever. So that's interesting. But then another way, music can activate emotional responses too, and this is sound hitting both your body and your ears. Lyrics aside, it can be just tonal sort of feels, like vibrational patterns causing you to feel certain ways, emotions coming out. And like I said before, so emotions are involved here too, and I think this is a little more difficult because you're basically in the sense of like communicating, right? If you're hearing something, you're hearing it from somebody. But you have the option. You could still tell a lie, or you can tell the truth on the spot. These emotions are rising, and you can still lie. But if you do lie, it literally just creates a similar effect where it will get sort of suppressed into yourself and just kind of elongate the sort of lie and the negative emotional response that you've had. But yes, communication in general is based on hearing. So I think it's really important to kind of mention about like humans like are connection sort of creatures. They really enjoy connection. And just a side note, I guess, about how this builds connection, about, you know, being honest and truthful with each other, better connection. And another, I guess, an example of this too, reading versus hearing. You know, like using your eyes, if you want to read a book that someone wrote, you can be skeptical or be like, I don't know, like it kind of makes sense. I don't like this part though, and this and that. But if the same author, you went to like a keynote presentation where he talked about the book that you just read, you could get a totally different sort of sense of what he was saying just by feeling him and feeling his words by the sound. So it's pretty interesting. And I guess a side note, the culture, the Bwiti culture, they told me that they don't read or write because that's the use of the eyes, and they just communicate with each other. And it's something they've done for generations. It's just interesting. But moving on to the ingredients to be happy. This was a part that really resonated with me when I was learning from the Bwiti culture tribe there. Everyone has the intention to be happy, and they kind of broke it down to the simplicity of two main ingredients. The first is truth. Truth is kind of a cornerstone from going from negative emotions to positive emotions. But basically 100% honesty with yourself once you come to terms and understand yourself, get to know yourself, 100% honesty in your expression to others. That is the core ingredient to have love flourish. And so I'm sure most people here enjoy love, right? Yeah, once love is being spread between your family, friends, community, it's the root of human connection. So moving on. So how does Iboga work therapeutically? I've kind of already gone over the physical detoxification stage before, but the next that I find to be the most important part is the psychospiritual. And one thing to note here is that the mind is not physical, like a part of your body. The mind is more connected directly to spiritual health. So that's why the psychospiritual has its own stage of work with your mind away from your brain. It's not the same. And first, I will get into a quote here, the shaman that I was working with down in over in Africa. A psychospiritual journey is for someone who is caught up in the past drama or who has locked themselves on negative emotions. They want to totally clear their mind and unlock themselves from drama and blocks. This type of journey can also be used to heal all mental problems at a spiritual level. So a little more here. Basically, the psychospiritual, what it is it gives you your ability to communicate with yourself on a spiritual plane. What that means is you have the ability to ask questions about problems in your life, and the medicine will allow your suppressed memories to be unsuppressed and brought to you to kind of show the answers to your questions, basically showing you the truth. An example of that would be if someone was, you know, like, why do I always get angry at work every time this happens, right? If on the medicine in this case, it would literally just show an event, say when you were a child, about a time that you were being physically abused by your father, for instance. And oftentimes that's a suppressed memory. So yeah, it's just a lot of things people don't realize. And that kind of, once I was learning about this, it kind of really resonated with me with this notion about, many of you have probably heard me say this before, awareness is the genesis of healing. But it's kind of something I've learned through this Naropa time about, you know, and able to heal from something, you always have to like start to work with it, almost like shadow work, stuff that's there that people don't even realize is there. But that's kind of where healing starts. You know, you got to be aware of something before you can heal. And another thing about this, it's kind of an interesting, some quotes that I have coming up, but it almost sounds like you could be your own therapist when you're talking to yourself in a way. So interesting. And these quotes, this is from one of the books that I had. Malendi was a shaman that was interviewed in one of the books. So I haven't actually met this guy, but Iboga is like a speeded up treatment for psychological issues. 3 days can be equivalent to several years of psychoanalysis. It breaks down to someone else trying to make you understand something through memories versus the person getting firsthand visual experience, showing 100% of the information needed. And the second one is the root has the virtue of psychological analysis. No one is judging you. When someone arises in you, you are the psychologist. You see yourself head on as if looking from the outside. And that means you can understand yourself better within your being. So I just thought those are very, very relevant points to this whole presentation that I'm trying to make. Getting to the conclusion part, how does the psycho-spiritual ceremonies work? I guess above all, Iboga is really meant to just heal. There's zero sort of recreational feel that you get from it. Healing is all about rediscovering yourself. And that's kind of why I chose this picture here. It's supposed to represent sort of like you looking down a new path and you finding yourself on this path, or I guess on the old path, but looking to sort of transfer yourself to a new path from healing. So I like the picture, I guess is what I'm saying. But, you know, Iboga, it's really the only tool that can really take a person back to the very beginning of their time, you know, to understand what caused the current problems going on in their life. So it's kind of like they have to face themselves by bringing up those past memories back to life. And these memories basically are shown to show you the truth. Until someone stops and faces and recognizes the truth, they're going to be stuck, and it's hard to really get yourself to be free, no matter what other, you know, tasks or events you're trying to do to achieve that. So no matter how bad your mind really is, or, you know, the use of pharmaceutical pills, or, you know, going to therapy or counseling, you'll never really heal yourself before your mind gets that awareness and is able to sort of be reset. What does it mean to kind of reset the mind? If you think about your brain as being like a computer, right? And it's sending signals to your body to control and everything. Well, your mind, the spiritual side of it, is like the hard drive. And if there's ever problems forming in your life, way to handle a hard drive is you basically have to go in, you have to delete, or you have to wipe it clean. Humans, we experience pretty much everything we experience gets stored into our subconscious memory, right? And so if you don't actively delete this or wipe it clean, all of these thoughts will stay with you, and the negatives will build on top of each other. So negative thoughts will stay, and you pretty much will lose space for any sort of positive thoughts. So all this information that I have shared is why I believe that using Iboga to heal one's mind is very beneficial, especially to this ever-growing, chaotic world that most of us here in Western society culture are exposed to all the time. Most importantly, you have to know that the medicine will not just do all the work for you. It's a difficult journey to achieve, but individuals, you have to know that they have to have their own intention to be ready to experience the truth. And of course, with this truth, you are to be set free. So the final little quote here I found really interesting, because most of you, many know that I often say the truth will set you free. But I actually learned that this was from a biblical reference. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So I thought that was just kind of interesting, you know, almost like a spiritual connection between different parts of the world all understanding the truth. So here are my references.